In the heart of the Yoruba kingdom, beneath the towering trees that whispered ancient secrets and within the sprawling villages where the earth pulsed with life, Sango, the mighty Orisha of thunder and lightning, ruled with unmatched power. His presence alone could stir the winds and split the sky, his storms commanding awe and fear in equal measure. The people revered him as the embodiment of the heavens, the one who brought both destruction and renewal in his wake. To them, he was the embodiment of the divine, his power indisputable, and his rule unchallenged. Yet, beneath the surface of his mighty reign, Sango's heart was a battleground, torn between three women whose power was as fierce and transformative as the storms he commanded. Oya, the goddess of winds and tempests, was a force of nature in her own right. Her fiery nature mirrored the storms she summoned with such ease, and her temper was legendary across the kingdom. Her love for Sango burned with an intensity that matched the whirlwinds she created. Every glance she threw his way was charged with unspoken challenges, as if proving her worth to him and to herself. She had been at his side during countless battles, standing shoulder to shoulder with him as they commanded the winds together. Their union was one of fierce power, an unstoppable force that could not be contained by the earth or sky. Sango admired Oya's strength and ferocity, the way she could whip up a storm with just the flick of her hand, how her eyes sparkled with a battle-ready fire. But despite his admiration, there was a quiet yearning within him, a pull he could not ignore. In Osun, the goddess of beauty and rivers, he found something entirely different. Osun's allure was not the thunderous roar of a storm but the gentle, calming rhythm of a river's flow. She was serenity incarnate, her every movement graceful and hypnotic, as if the earth itself flowed with her. Where Oya's intensity overwhelmed, Osun's calm provided balance. Her beauty was not just in her physical form but in the peace she exuded. Sango found solace in her presence, a quiet refuge from the chaos of his own reign. In Osun's eyes, he saw a future where he could find peace, a peace that Oya's storms could never offer. Her love was soothing, a balm to his restless heart, and yet, as Sango grew more entranced by Osun's gentle nature, the distance between him and Oya widened. Oya's storms, once a source of connection between them, now seemed to alienate him, driving him further into the embrace of Osun's river. Yet, it wasn't just Sango who felt this shift. Amidst the growing tension between the two goddesses, there was another, quieter presence, Oba. She had been Sango's first wife, the one who had stood by him before the tempestuous winds of Oya and the tranquil rivers of Osun entered his life. Oba's love for Sango was steadfast, unwavering, and deeply rooted in their shared history. She had seen Sango rise to power and had been his anchor during the early days of his reign. But as Oya and Osun's rivalry grew more pronounced, Oba's devotion, though no less pure, seemed to fade into the background. Oba was quiet in her love, her heart steady but uncelebrated it. She did not possess Oya's explosive fire nor Osun's mesmerizing beauty. Her love was a quiet, enduring force that did not demand attention, but instead, gave without expecting anything in return. She was not the storm that ravaged the land, nor the river that soothed it, she was the earth, the foundation upon which Sango's kingdom stood. Yet, as his heart became more divided between the wild passion of Oya and the tranquil beauty of Osun, Oba's presence seemed to be nothing more than a whisper in the background of their rivalry. As Sango spent more time in the embrace of Osun's calm and felt the fury of Oya's storms grow more intense, Oba began to feel the sting of neglect. Her place at his side, once sacred and cherished, was now overshadowed by the explosive love of Oya and the captivating charm of Osun. She could no longer deny the truth of the situation. Sango, though he had once loved her, had begun to drift away, lost in the tempest of his own emotions and desires. And while she remained a loyal and devoted wife, it seemed that her love was no longer enough to keep his heart anchored. In the midst of this powerful rivalry, Oba watched helplessly, her heart heavy with a sadness that grew deeper with each passing day. She could not fight against the winds of Oya or the river of Osun, yet her love for Sango remained, even as it slowly began to wither under the weight of the goddess's fierce competition. The storm was brewing, and Sango was at the center of it, torn between the women who each held a piece of his heart. And as the winds howled and the rivers swelled, the kingdom braced for the thunder that was sure to come. As the days passed, the love triangle between Sango, Oya, and Osun grew more complicated and intense. Oya, once the goddess of stormy passion, now felt the growing pull of jealousy as she watched Sango's affection shift toward Osun. The quiet beauty of Osun, with her calm and soothing presence, seemed to captivate Sango in ways that Oya's fiery intensity could not. Each time Sango praised Osun's gentleness or sought refuge in her tranquility, Oya's heart burned with envy. Her love, once a fierce and passionate force, was now tainted by her growing anger and resentment. The winds that had once carried her affection now carried her wrath, stirring violent storms that raged across the kingdom. Oya's fury was not only felt in the heavens but on the earth as well. Her storms grew stronger, more chaotic, tearing through villages, destroying homes, and devastating the crops that sustained the people of the land. The once lush fields were now scorched by lightning, and the rivers overflowed with the fury of her anger. The people trembled beneath the force of the storms, unsure of where they would strike next. And all the while, Sango stood at the center, his heart torn between two powerful women, each vying for his love in their own way. Sango, though mighty in his own right, was not immune to the pain of the situation. He tried desperately to calm Oya, speaking words of reassurance, but each time he praised Osun's beauty or sought solace in her peaceful nature, Oya's fury only intensified. He could feel the storm growing inside her, the very air thick with tension. The love he shared with Oya was fierce, but it was becoming increasingly clear that the storm goddess could not tolerate the peace that Osun offered. Osun, ever the gentle spirit, remained unshaken by Oya's rage. She understood the power of love and the complexities of the heart, but she also understood that love could not be forced. She knew she could never make Sango's heart settle in one place, and that realization only deepened her affection for him. Her quiet, loving presence was a balm to his troubled soul, and every moment spent with her left him craving more of the peace and serenity she offered. Yet, Osun was not blind to the storm that raged between her and Oya. She knew that the battle for Sango's heart was not about power alone, it was about love, a love that neither woman could claim fully. In the shadows of this fierce rivalry, Oba watched quietly, her heart aching as she observed the turmoil unfolding before her. The woman who had once stood by Sango's side now felt as if she were invisible in the midst of the storm. She could never match Oya's ferocity nor Osun's grace. Yet, her love for Sango ran deep, rooted in the earth itself, steady and unwavering. It was a love that did not demand attention but gave freely, even as the world around her seemed to unravel. Oba knew that she could no longer remain passive. Her heart ached with the knowledge that she was slowly losing the man she loved to two women whose powers were beyond her reach. And so, she made a decision, a choice that would change the course of her life and the fate of the kingdom. She would prove her worth, not through strength or beauty, but through sacrifice, offering Sango a love that was constant and true, even if it meant giving up everything for him. The gathering clouds in the sky mirrored the storm that now raged in the hearts of these three women, and the kingdom braced itself for the consequences of the choices that were about to unfold. One night, as the full moon rose high above the kingdom, its light casting a pale glow over the land, Oba stood silently by the banks of the sacred river. The same river that Osun, her rival, ruled with grace and power. As the gentle ripples of the river reflected the moon's light, Oba felt a deep sorrow in her heart. She had loved Sango with every fiber of her being, but she knew that her pure love, quiet and steadfast as it was, could never compete with the fierce passion of Oya or the serene beauty of Osun. Both women commanded forces beyond her reach, and it pained her to see Sango's attention pulled away from her by their overwhelming energies. Yet, Oba knew she could not give up. Her love for Sango was unyielding. In her heart, she believed that she could prove her devotion, if only she knew how. Standing at the river's edge, Oba closed her eyes and whispered a prayer to the ancestors, hoping for guidance. She called upon the spirits who had long watched over her people, seeking their wisdom. The night air was still, the only sound being the gentle flow of the river, until the spirits answered her. Their voices, soft as the wind, filled her mind with clarity. They spoke of an act of sacrifice, an offering of selflessness so profound that it would bind her heart to Sango's, forever showing him the depth of her love. The spirits told her that to win his heart, she must give up more than her devotion, she must give up her very identity. Only through such a sacrifice, the spirits whispered, could she truly prove her love. Oba's heart swelled with both fear and resolve. She understood what the spirits meant, but she also knew the cost. Her love for Sango was the foundation of her being, but she was willing to do whatever it took to show him how deep her feelings ran. She could not outmatch Oya's fury or Osun's beauty, but she could offer something neither of them could, a love that did not seek to possess, but to give freely, even at great cost. As the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, Oba made her way to Sango's sacred shrine. Her heart was heavy, but she knew this was the only way. Kneeling before the shrine, she offered her prayer, asking the gods to accept her sacrifice. She knew the transformation would be painful, but her love for Sango outweighed her fear. The gods answered her call. With a whisper of wind, Oba's body began to change. Her flesh turned to water, dissolving into the river she had once stood beside. As the river absorbed her form, it began to flow with a new energy. The Oba River, now named in her honor, surged through the kingdom. It was a silent tribute to her sacrifice, a river that would carry her love for Sango forever. And in that flowing water, her soul remained, bound to the land and to him, in an eternal act of devotion. When Sango found Oba's river, he was overwhelmed by a grief so deep it consumed him. Kneeling at the water's edge, he called out her name, but there was no response. The river, which had once flowed with life, now carried only sorrow. Oba's essence had merged with the water, her love for Sango eternal, yet unreciprocated. The river now bore the weight of her sacrifice, her devotion to him that had cost her everything. Sango wept bitterly, torn between the two women who remained by his side, Oya, whose storm had torn through his world, and Osun, whose grace and beauty had been overshadowed by Oba's final act of love. As Sango mourned by the riverbank, Oya arrived, sensing the change in the air. Her fierce eyes locked onto the river, and with a low growl, she recognized the cause of the shift in the world around them. Oba's sacrifice had bound her spirit to the river, making her love a permanent force, one that could not be erased. Oya's jealousy flared, and her anger grew like a storm that could no longer be contained. The winds howled as the sky darkened, and lightning cracked across the heavens. She felt the power of Oba's sacrifice and the love it symbolized. In that moment, Oya realized the extent of Oba's devotion, and she understood that this act had given Oba a power she could not match. The heavens trembled as Oya's fury erupted. With a deafening roar, she summoned a storm unlike any before, one that threatened to destroy everything in its path. Her heart, once filled with passion for Sango, was now consumed by bitter jealousy, and the storm she created reflected the chaos within her. The village below, once peaceful, now faced the full force of the tempest, with fierce winds and torrential rain that seemed to echo the fury of her heart. Osun, witnessing the storm and the pain it caused, felt a shift in the balance of power. She approached the river silently, her eyes filled with sorrow. Her love for Sango had never been about winning his heart, it had always been about offering peace and grace. Yet, as she gazed at the storm, she knew that neither beauty nor charm could have saved Oba from the storm's fury. Osun understood the cost of sacrifice. In a quiet voice, she spoke to the river, acknowledging Oba's love, her selflessness, and the profound depth of her sacrifice. She stood in silence, honoring the love that had shaped the very land, knowing that love, in all its forms, had its price. The storm raged for days, unrelenting and fierce. Dark clouds blotted out the sky, and the winds howled with a vengeance, tearing through the kingdom. Rivers swelled, flooding the lands, and the once bustling villages were now submerged beneath the torrential rains. The kingdom, once vibrant and alive, lay in chaos. Crops were destroyed, homes were washed away, and the people trembled under the power of nature's fury. And at the heart of it all stood Sango, unable to tear himself away from the sight of Oba's transformation. His eyes remained fixed on the river, where her essence had dissolved, becoming one with the water, and her love for him forever etched into the land. Sango's heart ached, his grief overwhelming as he thought of Oba's sacrifice. She had given everything, her identity, her being, out of love for him. She had vanished into the river, an eternal testament to her devotion, leaving behind only the Oba River, which now carried her spirit. He understood now, perhaps too late, the depths of her love. She had sacrificed herself, not to claim his heart, but to prove that her love was boundless, eternal. Yet, as he stared at the river, the reality of her sacrifice hit him with a heavy blow. She was gone, and he could never return her love in the way she had hoped. As the days passed, the storm showed no signs of abating. Oya, consumed by her jealousy and rage, was beyond reason. The storm she unleashed was not just a force of nature, it was an expression of her heart, torn and broken by her own feelings of betrayal. The winds she commanded uprooted trees, flattened entire villages, and left devastation in its wake. Sango could feel the pulse of the storm, the fury of Oya's power, and he knew that something had to be done. But what could he do? His heart was heavy with grief for Oba, and his mind was torn between Oya and Osun. He couldn't bear to see the destruction wrought by Oya's rage, but he also couldn't abandon Osun, whose calm and grace had always been his refuge. He was trapped between his grief for Oba and the fear of losing the love of the two powerful goddesses who still stood by him. Sango knew he had to act, but his indecision left him paralyzed. He could no longer keep the balance between the storm and the river, the consequences of his choices were already rippling through the kingdom. In that moment of despair, Sango finally understood the full weight of Oba's sacrifice. Her love had been pure, selfless, and complete. She had given everything, her identity, her life, out of love for him. But now, it was too late. He could never truly win the love of Oya or Osun, not without causing even more destruction. The rivalry between the two goddesses was eternal, and Sango was left to live with the consequences of their fierce love and conflict. The storm would continue, the river would flow, and he would be caught in the middle of their dance for eternity. The land was in turmoil. The once peaceful kingdom now trembled under the weight of the gods' fury. Oya's storm had swept through the villages, and the once bountiful crops were destroyed. The earth shook under the violence of her tempest, and the heavens themselves seemed to roar in protest. Sango, the mighty thunder god, watched from his high perch, his heart heavy with regret. He had never anticipated the depth of the consequences that would follow his indecision. Oya's winds grew fiercer, her jealousy tearing through the land like a hurricane. She had been the one to stand by Sango's side through every battle, every hardship, but now she felt abandoned. Her love had been as forceful as the storm itself, but Oba's sacrifice had shifted the balance in a way that Oya couldn't understand. How could Sango not see that her power was greater? How could he choose Osun, the calm and serene goddess, over the one who had always stood by him through every storm? But Sango, caught between his grief for Oba and his affection for Osun, could no longer deny the truth of the situation. He stood beneath the roaring clouds, his heart weighed down by the decisions that he had yet to make. The winds of Oya's fury howled around him, but it was Osun's voice that he heard clearly. She had come to him, her presence gentle, like the cool breeze of the river. Sango, Osun said softly, her voice like a lullaby in the chaos, you cannot continue to live like this. Your heart is torn, but the kingdom suffers because of your indecision. You must choose, not just for yourself, but for us all. Sango looked at her, his heart heavy with the realization that he could no longer stand between the two goddesses. The rivalry had already caused too much pain. It was time to make his choice. Sango stood at the edge of Oba's river, where the waters ran deep and sorrowful. It had been days since Oba had made her sacrifice, and the earth had not yet recovered from the devastation that followed. The river that now bore Oba's name flowed endlessly, its waters carrying the weight of a love lost and a devotion unmatched. Sango gazed into the river, seeing Oba's face in the ripples, and his heart ached with a pain he could not describe. "I have failed you," Sango whispered to the river. "I should have seen your love, your sacrifice. You gave everything, and I could not return it." The thunder god turned, feeling the weight of the decision that had to be made. He could feel Oya's presence, her storm still raging in the distance, and he knew that if he did not act soon, the fury of the winds would tear the kingdom apart. But it was Osun who stood beside him now, her gentle hand resting on his shoulder. Her presence was like the calming touch of the river itself. "Sango," Osun said, her voice filled with both sadness and understanding, "I have always known that you would choose love over power. But you must understand, your heart must choose not just for you, but for all of us." Sango looked at Osun, his heart torn between the love he had for her and the guilt he felt for Oba's sacrifice. But in that moment, he knew what he had to do. It was time to choose. The winds of Oya's wrath could no longer control him, and Oba's spirit deserved peace. The day Sango made his decision, the winds seemed to cease, and the clouds parted, allowing the sun to shine through for the first time in days. Oya's storm had subsided, though its scars remained on the earth. Sango stood in the center of the kingdom, his voice booming like thunder as he addressed his wives. "Oya, Osun," he began, his voice carrying the weight of his decision. "I have seen the damage my indecision has caused. Oya, your storms were born of love and anger, but they have torn the land apart. Osun, your grace has soothed my soul, but I must choose the path of peace." Oya, her face twisted in fury, stepped forward. "You choose peace over power," she spat, her eyes flashing with the rage of 1,000 storms. "You choose to abandon me." Sango, feeling the weight of her anger, nodded solemnly. "I have failed you, Oya. But I cannot allow the kingdom to be torn apart by our rivalry. My heart has been torn, but I must choose. It is not just for me, but for all of us." Osun, standing quietly beside him, placed her hand gently on his arm. "You have made the right choice, Sango. But know this, my love, your heart is torn not because you made the wrong decision, but because you loved all of us. And now, we must find peace in that love." Oya's anger flared one final time, but she said nothing. She turned away from Sango, her heart shattered, and with a great gust of wind, she disappeared into the sky. Sango watched her go, his heart heavy with regret, but also with relief. The storm had passed. The kingdom began to heal, but Sango's heart remained burdened. He had chosen Osun, but Oba's sacrifice still weighed heavily on him. Each day, he visited Oba's river, speaking to her spirit, apologizing for the pain he had caused. The river, though flowing endlessly, was silent in its response, a reminder of the love and loyalty Oba had given him. Osun stood by his side, offering comfort but also knowing that Sango could never forget what had happened. She had accepted his love, but she, too, carried the pain of the past. It was a pain that would never fully fade. Still, Osun remained steadfast, knowing that their love would eventually heal the scars left by the storm. One evening, Sango stood at the banks of the Oba River, his heart heavy with sorrow. "Oba," he whispered, "I have failed you, and I will never forget your sacrifice. You gave everything for love, and I failed to see it until it was too late." The river, its waters rippling gently, seemed to respond in a way that only Sango could understand. He could feel Oba's spirit around him, her love still flowing through the earth. It was a love that transcended life and death, a love that had shaped the land and the gods themselves. And so, Sango made a vow: he would honor Oba's sacrifice by protecting the kingdom and ensuring that the love she had given would never be forgotten. He would build a monument to her in the heart of the kingdom, a reminder of the love that had shaped the land, the love that would live on in the rivers and the storms. Years passed, and the kingdom flourished under Sango's reign. The storms no longer tore the land apart, and the rivers flowed with life once again. Osun's grace had brought peace to Sango's heart, and together, they ruled with wisdom and love. But the memory of Oba's sacrifice never faded. Sango, as promised, built a monument in Oba's honor by the banks of her river. The monument stood tall, a reminder of the selfless love that had once bound the kingdom together. And every year, on the anniversary of Oba's sacrifice, the people gathered by the river to honor her memory. As Sango stood before the monument, now a symbol of his growth and understanding, he knew that his love for Oba would never be forgotten. She had given everything for him, and though he had chosen Osun, Oba's sacrifice would forever remain a part of the kingdom's soul. It was a legacy of love, sacrifice, and the understanding that no love was ever truly lost. It lived on in the winds, the rivers, and the hearts of those who remembered. And so, the story of Sango, Oya, Osun, and Oba became a legend, passed down through the generations. It was a tale of power and passion, but also of sacrifice and love. The kingdom had been forever changed, but the legacy of Oba's heart, flowing through the river, would never be forgotten.